So, a brief history of Valentine's Day. We all know that since Valentine's Day is also known as the Feast of Saint Valentine, and it is celebrated on the 14th of February by most people in the world. And it's a pretty much a celebration of love and affection. I also found out that when the Catholic Church was like divided into like the eastern parts, and then we had the eastern parts. So the western parts was Rome. The capital was basically Rome, and then we had the eastern parts around like the Turkey, modern day Turkey area, and they actually recognize the 6th and 30th of July also as St. Valentine's Day. It turns out that there were actually multiple people named Valentine. So sometimes the stories get really mixed up. Personally, I can't say that I'm sure that this is the story of one person and this is the story of the other person. But yeah, anyway, this is what I found out from my little research. So the Orthodox Church recognizes Saint Valentine of Hieromonk, and then also the Bishop of Interamana. These were like different Valentines that also lived in the like after the, I think, second century, like from third century like onwards. And there are many like legends and folk tales surrounding these people. Saint Valentine II, which is the one that is known for Valentine's Day, it is said that he was really comforting and rescuing and succoring Christians that were persecuted during the time of Emperor Claudius II. And because of his Christian faith, he was imprisoned and asked to renounce his Christian faith, but he refused. It is said that while he was in prison, he befriended the jailer's daughter, Julia, and some sources say that she was healed, that he healed her of her blindness, and this caused the whole family to come to Christ and believe, and they were all baptized. And then others say that Saint Valentine was also imprisoned because he conducted, like, so to say, illegal marriages. And it said that the Emperor Claudius had forbidden soldiers from marrying because he believed that this would somehow like weaken them, and he wanted to build his army. So he forbade them from marrying. But then people say that there's actually no proof that this was actually done, that the emperor actually encouraged his soldiers to take multiple wives if they wanted to do so. Other sources say that this is not actually the same Saint Valentine, that this is a different Valentine that lived after the first one. And so it's hard to really get a clear story. So because of this, all this legends, there are many legends surrounding him, surrounding his death, his burial. Like there are multiple people that claim that this is where he's buried, and we have his remain, and we have all sorts of like artifacts from him. I also found some sources that show that Valentine's Day is actually linked to a pagan celebration of love, fertility, and the like. And this celebration was actually celebrated also on the 14th of February, or actually it was between 13th and 15th of February. It was a pagan feast that was celebrated around 270 AD. And during this Roman priests would go into like this cave or shrine or whatever they had, and they would sacrifice goats and dogs to the Roman gods of love and fertility. Some say the feast was to the god of agriculture, and some say it's to the gods of love, marriage, and fertility, Pan and Juno. It's hard to say, but the main thing is that the main thing was that the priest would sacrifice these dogs and goats and animals to purify the people, and then they would go around using the hair of the goats. They would dip it in the blood of the sacrifice, and then they would kind of, they say, gently flog women, and this was believed to make them fertile. But I also read from other sources that this feast was actually it was potentially more violent than what is actually what is said to be. Some people say that these priests were actually drunk during this feast, and this was a really violent something, and it wasn't just like gentle strokes with the goat's skin or hair, that they were literally beating, flogging women, and they didn't mind because this was what they were told would make them fertile. And also during this time, women would be randomly paired with men. Men would just, I guess, by lottery, pick women, and then they'll get matched. And then these matches would be maintained during the feast. And, after the feast, if they felt like it was a good match, the relationship would continue and maybe possibly lead to marriage. So it is believed that Christianity became more popular. The Pope Galasius, the Pope, when he came on board, he realized that this feast is a pagan feast, is very unchristian. So they said that he turned it into St. Valentine's Day just to make it more Christian. And people say that when the feast was abolished, they didn't actually stop people from doing the sacrifices and doing everything that was related to the feast. It was just a change of name. And so initially, when it became the feast of St. Valentine, it was about what he did, how he died for his faith and everything. But then down the line, so many legends started to pop up, and people started to come up with their own stories. For example, stories surrounding his relationship with the jailer's daughter, Julia. Some say that he fell in love with her, and and they made it into a very tragic love story, like Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, how they fell in love and their love was tragically cut short because, St. Valentine was killed, and all sorts of stories have been made up about him. And especially because it said that before he died or before he was killed, St. Valentine wrote Julia a letter that he signed Your Valentine, which is his name. But then that was taken as a love letter. And now we have the tradition of signing Valentine cards, that way. I found out that the first association that was made of Valentine's Day and romantic love was actually perpetrated by poets and writers during the Middle Age. For example, there is this English poet that wrote a poem to honor the engagement of Richard II of England and Anne of Bohemia in 1382. I have the poem here. I can read it just to give us some context. For this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every bird comes there to choose his match of every kind that men may think of, that so huge a noise they began to make, that earth and air and tree and every lake was so full, not easily was there space for me to stand, so full was all the place. And then we have, of course, writers like William Shakespeare in his play Hamlet. There's also a mention of Valentine's Day. It says, tomorrow is St. Valentine's Day, all in the morning be time, and I a maid at your window to be your Valentine. Then up he rose and donned his clothes and drooped the chamber door, let in the maid, that out a maid, never departed more. So things like this began to drive the entire drive a culture of romantic love. And at this point, what Saint Valentine originally stood for was pretty much forgotten. By 1787, in Britain, they began to like mass produce Valentine cards because there was a need for it. People were buying that culture of romance, and it was very easily monetized and like became like a money maker for many people. Like imagine that in 1835, about 60,000 Valentine cards were being posted around England. And at the time, posting card is not as cheap as it is, nowadays. It was a very expensive something for you to buy a postmark. That was expensive. And then when the price became cheaper, I think in 1845, immediately there was a rise in number of cards that were being posted. It went from 60,000 to 400,000, and this was just, I think, in the span of 1 year from like these cards being popularized. And, by 1868, they started bringing in more things. First, it was cards, and then came chocolate boxes. I don't remember the name of the company, but there was a company that made the first chocolate box, and it was, I think heart shapes and different types of shapes, and this became also a thing that people associated with Valentine's Day. And by the 20th century, people were buying all sorts of gifts from flowers to jewelries. People would like break their banks to buy their lover or who they want to win over with gifts. They will break their banks to buy them all sorts of gifts. And this began in the UK. And then pretty much around the same time, it also traveled to the US, where it became even more popular. It is estimated that right now about 190 million cards are sent every year on Valentine's Day. And of course, it's not just to lovers. People send cards also like to their mothers, to their children, to their brothers and sisters. And this is a huge, huge, huge money maker. So this is the brief history of Valentine's Day.